Is that still a thing? Or
Incandescent light bulb.
Are you guys getting on Be Real?
What's Be Real?
Oh,
You haven't seen Be Real? It's the new social media, right? Where you only get to post one day.
Oh my God.
One time. It takes a front-facing picture and a back-facing picture, and you only have 2 minutes to post at that time.
I saw this on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, it was on. That's the first time I heard about it, and I was like, oh my God, I'm getting that old. To the point where I don't know about the social media until it's on SNL.
So this is literally from SNL, but yeah, so they you have to take a picture and you have a time to like post it or whatever. They
2 minutes, like 2 minutes.
2 minutes, a front and back, and if you don't put it in there, then they're like, oh, you're not being real or whatever. So it's like, not
live in the now type.
Live in the now, like you're not like.
What are you doing?
I gotta tell you, if you're living in the now, you shouldn't be posting anything. But hey,
that's a good point. That's a quote.
Well, this Be Real app is the new thing now. So
is it like popular amongst inmates in solitary confinement?
Yes, they're only allowed to possess cell phones.
They're like, you could use no social media except for Be Real, and that's just for security purposes.
Primarily,
so we know where you're at.
Yeah,
you joke about that, but I've done some stuff with the U.S. Marshals in the past, and it's amazing how many people that are on the run from the police are still using social media really regularly. And,
oh yeah.
Like selfies, and they're like, well, shit, he's there. So we're going to go to the Starbucks and pick him up.
He's there. Yeah, I've done enough of those Trace Labs OSINT CTFs to know that most missing people are still checking in on Facebook or Instagram or posting. Or
That's the lesson you learned from that?
He got it, didn't he? Nailed it. First time go this one.
All right. So lots of DDos. Okay.
Yeah.
The bio stuff.
What the hell? I haven't been reading the news for the past 48 hours. Wow, there's been some stuff that's happened.
Everyone knows we're live, right? We covered that.
Yeah. Everyone knows that John reads the stories literally right before the show. So
it's still flickering, but we'll go with it. We're doing it live.
All right, let's do it. Kick it off, Ryan.
Broken finger.
Oh yeah, finger time.
Broken it.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Black Hills Information Security Talkin Bout News. Today, I have no idea what the news stories are. And the reason why I don't have any idea what the news stories are is let's go to Ryan's camera and let's see what's going on in the background, Ryan. Ryan is currently at Wild West Hacking Fest 2022. He is in the labs and CTF section. And he's currently, correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, you are currently doing this live from a bar, right?
I am. We're broadcasting from a bar, or I am
broadcasting from a bar, and then behind you, further on down, is another bar. There's another bar at the end.
Way back there.
Way back, yeah. So there's a ton of stuff. I think we have about almost 700 people showing up in person. We have 200 and some people that are showing up live for the training. We have 400 total for training. And over 1,000 people, virtual and live, showing up for Wild West Hacking Fest. So we're really excited about that. So that's where he's at. And I'm in the studio. I redid the studio down in Spearfish. So we're here. I'm also joined by Ralph, who's still at home. And he'll be coming out here in a couple of days. Corey will be here tomorrow. Mike, you coming out this year?
No, I'm going to be out at the other conference.
Oh, at GERCON. That's right. And then Wade is going to be...
in San Diego.
You're going to be in San Diego.
Nowhere.
Loser. It sucks being in San Diego if you don't go out in the sun. And
I hate it when the weather's a perfect 70 degrees all week.
All the time. Thank you, Ron Burgundy. So you guys are going to have to help me out. I've been doing prep for Wild West Hacking Fest all week. My class starts tomorrow. And let's... Ralph, Corey, start us off with a news story. What do we got?
So this is a blast from the past. We got DDos. Remember when that used to work? It works
that was
again.
A thing.
Apparently just in time. I think they're trying to prevent people from getting to Wild West Hacking Fest because they're taking down airports.
Yeah, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to mess with us.
Pro-Russian hackers.
So Killnet Please just give it a rest for like a week and a half. Just a week and a half is all we're asking for.
I mean, yeah, so I guess the way that they determine that they're taking down airports is they go to www.atl.com and they're like, it's down. Like, I don't know if it's necessarily the best indicator. Like, were any flights actually interrupted, or is it literally just taking down the poster?
There were some flights that were interrupted yesterday. I know that there were some flights that were canceled, but I don't know if it was due to weather or the DDoS attack.
It does say that in this case, the DDoS attacks do not impact flights, but they have an effect on the function of a crucial economic sector, I guess.
What does that mean?
It's
not taking down the flights. What is it taking down trains? Like the trains stop working? Or
it's the baggage fees. That's my theory.
It's the baggage fees. That's it.
Yeah,
it's the delay notifications.
Yeah. There you go. It's the delayed notifications.
I mean, the theme of this year has been Russia has no idea what they're doing. They can't drive tanks. I guess they can't drive DDoSes anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, that like a website is just the poster that a company puts up to say, please buy our product. It's not usually that.
Honestly, the ATL website's not that great. So like,
so we're not missing much, honestly.
No,
I don't know what there's to miss. It's not like the only flight on there.
I mean, I guess some people might be like, oh, I need to see if the train is in the station or whatever. But like, I think more than anything, Mike mentioned before the show that they are kind of threatening to target other verticals or healthcare or other things. So who knows?
Why can't people just target cool stuff like DNS? Like Mirai did.
Yeah, if you're gonna bring infrastructure down, you got to remember the attackers that brought down dying DNS. Those were the days,
right?
Those were hackers that you could respect.
The at least bring down something cool. Like where everyone's like, oh, no one thought.
Gotta be careful.
That was real cool.
Like the whole power grid goes down, and the hackers are like, "Is this cool enough for you, Wayne? All we've tried to do ever is impress you, and you keep putting us down." So.
Well, the other thing too is that, this used to be cool maybe like 5 or 6 years ago when it was a little more effective. But I think a lot of the, like Cloudflare and other providers have come up with a bunch of different ways to kind of, shut these DDoS attacks down. They used to be a lot more common, and I feel like they're a lot less common and they're a lot less duration, right?
Well, that's
like
because
the site's already back up.
That's because there was a tremendous amount of money. If you're looking at like Cloudflare and all these different companies, Dyn DNS and stuff, they've put a lot of money in being able to handle these types of attacks. And it's funny because usually what it means is just a lot more bandwidth.
Let's throw more money at it.
Well, as someone who worked at a data center, I can confirm.
Yeah, they fought it with bandwidth, and they also fought it with validating users and all different ways that they're doing that, right?
So
none of it's perfect, but bandwidth is the default.
On another, because wasn't there like recent Darknet Diaries where they're talking about DDoSing people's like Roblox servers or Minecraft, right, for profit? Yeah. And I think it's still going on. It's just not going on to major corporations that we care about now. It's like secret underground factors where kids can't get on their Roblox servers, so they're DDoSing the competition because they stole their game format.
If John's point, which I agree with, is accurate, that it's all a money game, then trying to take down a large major website requires more money than they're willing to sustain for that time, for fun. So
yeah. And I don't know. It's funny, years ago, talking about the bandwidth thing, all joking aside, this is probably about 8 years ago. I was talking with a bunch of Google engineers, and we were talking in one of the classes I was teaching about DDoS attacks. And afterwards, I was like, I got to wondering, what does Google do? And their engineers were like, we don't know. What do we do for DDoS attacks? And they we have no plan. Like they didn't know. And they went and they checked back with their friends, and literally their answer was, we have bandwidth. And I'm like, how much bandwidth does Google actually have? And the response was, all of it. That was literally their, in case of emergency, break glass, have lots of bandwidth. So now, how effective do you all, let's talk a little bit about Cloudflare, because there's a lot of screenshots in there. I actually think that Cloudflare has been pretty effective. It's shutting down a lot of the smaller DDoS attacks that an organization is most likely going to run into. But once again, they're not 100% effective, because eventually you can saturate all the bandwidth everywhere, or they can find where your IP addresses are, misconfigurations. There's a bunch of ways that can fail. But
Yeah.
Also, do you think that we're seeing fewer DDoS attacks because of companies like Cloudflare just getting better at what they do?
I don't think
Yes.
people report on them anymore.
Yeah.
Because every now and then
Yeah.
something will come out where like, oh, the biggest DDoS ever seen. Nobody cares because it's not as sexy as malware or
was,
ransomware,
yeah.
right? It used to be the thing, right? And
Well,
Yeah.
as a blue teamer, my first thought on if I get DDoSed is also like, what else did they do? Is this a distraction for something in the back end, right? Or are they using this to do something else? And I feel like that never happens anymore. Maybe
Well-
DDoS just isn't cool. Like we're going back to it.
And Wade, you're kind of talking about years ago, we would have DDoS attacks that would specifically target banks, and it would target the main websites of those banks to take those web pages down. And that would usually go in conjunction with a mass like spam spear phishing attack where they were telling people, hey, you need to log into the bank portal, got to reset your password. Here's a link in this email, go here. And they were worried about people actually legitimately going to the real website and doing it there. But if you shut that website down, they come back to the email and then they click the link and then they would enter their credentials. We saw a lot of that where these attacks would go in conjunction with some other type of attack. Is that kind of what you're referring to there?
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly it, right? Or distraction or something. And that's, once again, we don't see or hear about it anymore. And I do think it's the news. And it's also, once you get, like you said, DDoS protection is actually a real thing and it works.
Yeah.
I think
Cloudflare
it's
is
the
doing a good thing.
complexity thing too. Like as the complexity of infrastructure has gone up, like DDoS is just simple attack. It's like, okay, you have an army. Where do you point it? Like nowadays, there's probably the average Fortune 500 has probably 500 different endpoints or different. Like you'd have to DDoS so many different servers and host names and Cloudflare and
But you're also
Akamai and
like moving shit to the cloud and
Yeah.
you're going
And
to
they have big
DDoS
pipes.
Amazon.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know it's going to happen like next week and they're going to like do a mic drop, but a lot of that is changing, right?
Yes.
Like our email is all in Office 365. Microsoft's up, we're up. And that's kind of the mindset, I think, for a lot of people.
Is that a risk factor you guys ever talk about where say that did happen, right? We're in AWS West 1 and we're thinking about what if someone else there did get targeted with the biggest DDoS we've ever seen. Like maybe we're in all AWSs, but what would happen if that particular AWS went out?
See, and this is something that I talk about a lot with our customers and I talk about it in the classes. I don't care. And the reason why is there's only so much risk that you can actually take on, right? And you can try to set up failover between multiple different regions, which is what companies do, right? So if they go down in West, they can switch over to East or so on. But the reason why I say for most companies, I don't care, because if you get hit by a DDoS attack like that, the narrative is there was a DDoS attack, hit Amazon, a whole bunch of companies went down and people got like the afternoon off, right? That's the story. It's not an issue of if I'm running my own DMZ, I'm doing everything through my own network, and then it goes down, then it is truly my responsibility. That's a completely different narrative. So it's the difference between I done screwed up in my security or it's a random act of God in bringing my network down.
No, that's a good point.
I think there are examples, like if you are doing cloud pen testing and you're talking, or even just like they call it secure development lifecycle, right? Like basically not really pen testing, but just making sure that all the check boxes are checked. We do analyze to make sure that resource consumption, resource exhaustion, you have to somewhat plan around it. As an example, Amazon, simple concept, has availability zones of different data centers, they're actually mixes of data centers, and it's really complicated. But basically, if you were running a website and you didn't use any CDN and you were literally just running it on one host in one availability zone, there could be a finding for this is easy to take down. It's easy to just fall over on its own. It's not even that someone's going to try to take it down. But I think for the most part, like John said, even in that case, it's probably still worth the risk because it isn't your problem. It's someone else's problem. You can drink coffee and just wait for it to come back.
And that gets into, we often get into these weird esoteric conversations at Black Hills Information Security in the pen testing group. Like, what is the severity of these different risks? And a lot of that is based on what do we think our customers are pretty much going to be inclined to ignore. And over the years, we slowly started fading out those vulnerabilities that were like that, like susceptibility to DDoS attack, because literally no one cared and no one ever changed anything. And more importantly, it didn't tie to a compliance framework from a checkbox perspective. so they just weren't interested, and it was just a losing battle. After
It's totally not a cybersecurity thing. It's more of a business continuity thing for most of our clients. It isn't really a security concern. It's more just like, hey, your website's in one availability zone. If it does go down, you can't make money. You probably care more about that than if it's a security implication of that. But
so I was curious. I looked up a couple statistics on DDoS. 95% of them are less than 4 hours. Okay. Yep. With most of them being within the couple minute range, especially those really big ones that like make a headline news for a minute where there's like 5 teraflops or whatever. It's usually like 4 minutes that they sustain this, right? But yeah, I mean, I guess they're still around. It's just like, what's the, what is, and additionally, those 95% of attacks that occurred within 4 hours, they only lasted within 4 hours. That doesn't even mean that the site wasn't available. That just means that they were being attacked.
Right.
So yeah.
But that's a huge difference, right? Like if you're looking at the nature of the conversation is they were under attack for a short period of time, but it's not that they were completely knocked out. Well, once again, if you're a CEO, do you care? Like Cloudflare is doing their job. You have enough bandwidth. You're moving stuff to the cloud. How much effort are you going to put into this? And I still come back to this story. Like, why in the hell is this a story? Like, why do we even care about this story?
Because of the Russia stuff.
Because of the Russia stuff.
Is that it? I mean, is that really it? I mean, I tend to agree, but it seriously does seem like it's just because of the Russia stuff that we're talking about this at all. Like, just probably who the actual attacker is.
Yeah, I think DDoS and availability is an issue, right? But it's less of an issue than it was in the sense of like most people are able to, fend it off. We have kind of more tools, right? They're still happening, right? And it's still something that we have to be aware of.
There's no profit for attackers either. Like how is an attacker going to profit off of DDoS usually, right?
Yeah,
so that's my thought on it. And when I worked at the data center, like we used to get DDoSed, and they would actually call us and tell us, give us free servers. DDoS, give us free servers or we're going to keep DDoSing you. We're just like, no, right? And just null route the IP. We're good. Done.
I mean,
and this is actually like one of those historical like things that, Tribal Flood Network 2000 and kind of the history of DDoS attacks and how it became the botnet architecture of what we deal with today. It's actually really, really fascinating. There's a lot of history because a lot of the original hacking was designed to try to make a point, right? Hacktivism, I guess, before they were really making heavy money at it. And DDoS was one of the best ways to make a point. And you saw a lot of organizations that were actually doing that. So yeah, if you ever get a chance, go to the Distributed Denial of Service Wiki and just start reading up on the tools and the history associated with it, booters and video games. A great presentation if you want to see it at Black Hat. A number of years ago, Allison Nixon gave a presentation where she talked about unmasking and finding real IP addresses. And one of the executives of Cloudflare came up and challenged her while she was on stage. And she was like, challenge accepted. So there's some great history with this, but I do feel like this is like the lightsaber. It's a weapon of a bygone era. It's just not going to be used nearly as much as it used to be.
Yeah, I think this is more just newsworthy because it's someone calling their shot. Killnet being like, hey, you're screwed. But then they're like, we took down your website for 3 hours. Sorry, guys. That's the best we can do. So
it's Russia, it's Ukraine. And we were talking about this before you came on, John. Overall, it's a slow news week.
Well, and you know what? I'll take that. Like the week before Wild West Hackin' Fest. Absolutely. Absolutely.
The thing that really scares me, and someone mentioned this in the chat, is the physical attack, the cut the fiber cable, taking down rail traffic, or
that was pretty crazy,
or like the sharks attacking underground, or sharks attacking underwater internet cables, or them blowing up the gas pipeline. I think it's like that is going to be much more effective in denying service because you can't it doesn't come back up after 4 hours if someone cuts a fiber line. Unless they find out where it was cut and splice it within a short period of time.
Did somebody talk about that? Because the Russians did that before they invaded the Ukraine. They did like an underwater sea line from like, I want to say like Iceland to the mainland. And no one was really talking about it until after the Ukraine war happened or started.
And it was a thing.
It was a thing, yeah. And I guess they have specialized submarines just for that as well, which I never knew
Well,
about. So I
this gets
dived
out of
into it.
our bailiwick, right? But you start getting into the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. I don't know if it's
Mhm.
still spewing natural gas, but that's that's some scary stuff too. I mean, if you're a
Yes.
nation state and you're going to launch this type of attack, like you can literally just cut lines,
Yeah.
or I'm not saying that you should do this, but I'm saying it'd be much easier just to rent a backhoe for an evening.
Yeah, the reason I had brought it up is because about 5 days ago, the German train system, they announced that it was sabotage that took down their
God, you had to
infrastructure.
say sabotage. Now I have that song in my head.
So-
Oh, here we go.
Or
ahead.
the German word for sabotage, which it says auf sabotage, so I'm gonna assume it's still sabotage.
All right.
Right.
All right, let's move on. What other stories do you guys have queued up for this week?
So we got to talk about the Uber guy for sure.
Oh, wait, let's
Yeah,
talk about
yeah.
the Uber thing.
Because that's an interesting sort of, I guess, precedent where someone is actually being, getting in trouble for their actions behind the wheel. No pun intended.
He's been working on that for like 2 hours.
I think we've joked about this many times where it seems like maybe the CSO role or the CISO role is really going to become the sacrificial lamb moving forward. It's like all the executives are on a boat in the middle of the ocean and they're like, CISO's looking mighty tasty right about now. Like, that's the guy. And I find it also very, very, very difficult to believe that Mr. Sullivan worked on his own completely.
Yeah, so it's jury, right?
Right.
It's a jury. So it is, basically the does anyone want to read the verdict or I guess for the guests or, listeners that may not know what we're talking about, a recent Uber security chief, Joe Sullivan, was found guilty for not disclosing a data breach.
Yeah.
So this is not speculation. This
happened.
Yes, this happened. This is not just, it could happen. It's a jury's verdict. And it will have ramifications for, like John said, the sacrificial lamb of, if you can go to jail for this, but hopefully the jury took that into account, whether he acted alone or
I don't think,
people.
I would hope it wouldn't have made a difference for the jury on that, on that note, because seriously, if he did it, he did it. The thing that I'm concerned about more than anything else is, once again, I can't see a CISO doing this in a vacuum. Joe, what happened today? Nothing.
I need $10,000. For what?
It'll be
Nothing.
imagine a clause built into your contract saying if you go to jail, you get X amount of money.
Oh, I guarantee you, there's contracts out there,
right? Like that.
Absolutely.
After this, there have to be, or they're gonna cover all your legal costs and stuff like that as well. Like there's gonna be a bunch of built-in safety nets for CISOs now, I believe, after this.
If I was a CISO, I would want, I don't know if I'd want it to be that on the nose, but I would want, like, the company would be paying for my legal fees and any fees or anything from that. Because this is I don't know, this is so dicey to me, right? Like, you have a breach, what constitutes a breach that needs to be disclosed to the FTC?
Yeah.
Now, the FTC believes that that's clean cut. They know exactly what it is. Really? It's basically if the FTC is actually interested. And I'll give you an example of a conversation that I had with a company down this path. They were compromised. They knew that they were compromised. But the problem was there was not proper logging in the organization. So we couldn't identify the extent of the breach. We knew a Linux server on the edge of their network was compromised, but we didn't know if the attackers actually got access to user data. And we didn't know if they got access to the user data because they didn't have proper loggings for us to be able to answer that question. So we were basically like, you have to notify. I'm sorry, you have to notify. And the lawyers working for that company were like, hang on now. We actually don't have any proof whatsoever that any user data itself was actually compromised. Therefore, no harm, no foul. And that was where their lawyers were actually pushing. In fact, their lawyers were pushing to have less telemetry and less logging.
Oh my God.
Just because of the situation, because they said, if we know that there's a breach, then we have to do certain things. What if we don't know that there's a breach? Thankfully, the owner of the company
security with no security.
That
is the worst
approach.
story ever.
Security, right? That was it, right? So there's conversations like that. We also have conversations where they're like, we want to offshore or outsource as much of our IT security as possible, so it's handled by an external third party. So if there is a breach, we could be like, our third party sucks. It's not our fault. So when you're looking at this case, you got to think about what are all the different multitude of different ways that it can break. Companies doing less for security, and companies like setting up contract clauses for their CISOs that allow them to make money if something like this happens, like literally a golden parachute. Companies that are trying to offshore or outsource as much as their security as possible because it creates indemnification between the security team and the executive branch. There's all kinds, or executive group, there's all kinds of crazy things that if you just start thinking this through that are going to happen.
So a couple of interesting notes. Number one, they do mention in the article that the FTC, the federal government itself, has no official standard for the X number of records need to be disclosed for you to have to report it. Some states do have that. And the other interesting bit is that they actually use the bug bounty program to pay them out quietly.
Yes.
So it's kind of like how he could have actually kind of acted sort of on his own, because it's like, you want money from us? Well, the best we can do is 10K because that's the highest payout we do on bug bounty. So just go over here, submit a bug. I'll get you going. We'll get 10K paid out.
They capped the program at 10. They paid the hacker 100. They had the hacker sign a non-disclosure agreement. And during his testimony, one of the hackers said he was trying to extort money from Uber.
He's just like, submit another bug. Submit another bug. You need to do 10.
The question going forward is this, is how many CISOs are going to actively try and obstruct the FTC from doing something, as opposed to, as John was saying, just, oh, we don't have the logs and you don't have the logs. I think that there's where the difference comes in. It also comes in where the regulations for the industries themselves say, oh, you need to have XYZ. I mean, we all know PCI and we all laugh about it, but there are set specific rules in there for logging. You need to have a pen test here. You need to do this. And if you break those, you're in violation of certain things automatically.
And Mike, that just got me kind of piqued because this is the FTC, right? And the reason why you have to disclose a breach is because it is something that investors would like, they should be obligated to know about your company, because that would impact the investment decisions for that company. Now, here's an interesting thing, kind of what I've been kind of ranting on, like, what is the value of a breach? Like, I know that Rice wrote a book, Freakonomics, where he was talking about computer security. No, it wasn't Freakonomics. It was Hackonomics? Geekonomics. That was the name of the book, Geekonomics. And David Rice was the name of the author. And he was talking about what the cost of data breaches actually were. Now, from the FTC's perspective, look at the track record of all these different companies that have been breached. Has it actually impacted the stock value of those companies? That's another interesting take for this as well.
Because Uber just got breached recently again.
No, they've changed their culture since 2016. It's all fixed now. Don't worry. They have
dude, Ralph, they hired the top people from Twitter.
Got it.
I had to. It was easy. It's like people.
They put their best Twitters on it.
I mean, I do think this one is an example of this. He did not act alone. He did not tell the legal counsel. He did not tell he did tell the CEO though. And then basically how it kind of got discovered was the new CEO came in and is like, "Are you kidding me?" And then he fired all of them. So
what would you do? Like, I mean, seriously, if you're a CEO today for a major company, like, you've got a tech background, right? Like, you have to have some level of tech chops.
You hope.
If you're going to be successful, right? Unless you're Oracle, but that's weird. We won't talk about that.
They didn't see the Matrix.
You come in and you see that, and you've got to be like, this is a clown show. Like, we've got to clean house. You have to. Otherwise, you become liable for it, right?
I do think, though, his defense was that he made the bug bounty program and non-disclosure agreement to prevent user data from being leaked and to identify the hackers, and that Mr. Sullivan never intended to conceal the incident from the app.
Okay, but now that once again comes back to
the jury.
If it's paid out and it's handled through a bug bounty, is that something that has to be shared with shareholders? And if that does the results of network pen tests have to be shared with?
I guess the final nail in the coffin, according to one jury, was that the documents in the lawyer's case included the edits to the non-disclosure agreement, making it clear that Sullivan had hidden the breach from authorities. It was all dated and timed and documented very clearly.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and this is an example of, we talked about the dangerous precedent of like, they're just the fall guys and gals, but I think mostly it is the way that he very much acted alone. He kept the legal counsel in the dark. He told the CEO like, hey, we're screwed. We're just going to make it go away with 100K. Sound good? Okay, good. Just like he really did kind of go way. And like, John, in the example you gave of a company, think about all the people at that company that are involved versus just one guy texting BHIS, hey, John, we got hacked. Should I tell the FTC yes or no? Like,
yeah, my answer to that, I've got a default. It always responds yes. If it says breach and should we, it's like, yes, it automatically responds.
There's an email rule for that. But yeah.
There's an email rule for that.
Yeah, I think this is one where it may change things going forward, but this is, I would like to say that his legal counsel says that his goal throughout his whole career has been ensuring the safety of their personal data. So.
Huh. Yeah. Well, and the other thing he could have done with this is if he would have brought in legal counsel and had them work on that non-disclosure agreement, then it would have been protected information and it wouldn't have been discoverable. And that's that. Okay. So that gets into, if you're working a breach and you start hiding it from people, like he talked to the CEO, right? There's more than one. It wasn't just him. There were other people that were working on this, right? He's the one that's going to get into trouble for it. But if you start hiding it, you're like, oh my God, there's a breach and we're not going to tell our security team. And that is actually what happened at Bank of America. I don't know if you remember, there was a USB thumb drive that was lost and a tremendous amount of incriminating data was on that thumb drive. And the executives were keeping that crap on thumb drives because they didn't trust their security team. Like they didn't want anybody else to know. If you're doing that, that's bad. If you're doing something in your company and you decide you're going to quote unquote hide it from your own attorneys, that's bad. Stop, lay down on the floor and wait for the urge to pass and then go back. So
yeah, I think this is also a unique case where they actually had convicted the hackers already and they were testifying. Like they really had the whole picture. So
and it's rare to get that kind of clarity.
Yes. It's rare to get that kind of clarity, that the nail in the coffin of the document metadata, like, oh, take out this edit where it says we will inform the FTC. Okay, yeah, that was me. Like, it's so obvious, but
oh God.
Yeah.
So here, I'm going to put it in private chat. We can put it up and we can talk about this. Here, let me share a link.
Yeah, I have the link up right now.
Yeah,
you've got it already because I was looking at it. This came from Brian down in New Zealand.
The Fortinet. So this was released today. So it's a Fortinet. It's a auth bypass bug. So a couple things about
again.
This.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, they love authentication bypasses. Is
we're the best firewalls. Another one.
We the best. So this was announced today. It does affect a couple different products: the Forta OS, Forta Proxy, and Forta Switch Manager. A couple different versions in there. It also has already been, I think there has been some attacks in the wild exploiting this issue. So yeah, not good.
Update your Forta stars.
Update your Forta. Well, oh yeah, my favorite line from every one of these articles: per Shodan, there's exactly these many Fortinets out there.
How many are there? 140K. Wow, that's
I love Shodan for that.
That's not that
just
many.
Like here it all is right here. Here's all of them.
Okay, so here's my first question though about these, right? Why would you have your Fortinet proxy manager web interface publicly exposed?
Well, hold on.
The answer, dude, I can answer that. Done in one MSPs. Okay. MSPs that have to manage it for a lot of different companies.
I mean, what about
try to set it up securely is a pain in the ass. And you're a small MSP. Let's say you're out in South Dakota or Kansas, and you have like 25, 30 customers. Yeah, you could totally set it up for a VPN and do access through that. Or no, that crap's hard. Just open that straight up so you can get right to it.
So yeah, it does say even in the advisory, it says if you can't update, here's what you should do: disable the administrative interface or limit the IP addresses that can reach the administrative interface. Which, by the way, if you've purchased a pen test from Black Hills Information Security within the last however long we've existed, that has been a finding.
and Corey, like how many times do we get pushback from our customers on that? Like even from like the user subnet, like for standard workstations, they're like, hey, all of your security appliances, like their administrative interfaces are completely exposed.
Oh, it's
and they're
the
like,
junk
well,
food.
but technically that's behind our firewall. And I'm like, you're a company of 120,000 users. Let's go out on a limb that
Ooh,
one
crazy
out of
talk.
150,000 of your systems is probably compromised. And let's start there. But we get pushback on that type of vulnerability all the time. Customers
I
like,
see that
make
too
it
with like
informational for us. So.
Yeah, and like IPMI and other stuff like that. Like no user needs to have access to this. Dude. Like there's no real good use case. While like John said, 100,000 people need to have access to this, or all of the cameras, or whatever. Just segmentation in general, right? But yes, you don't like just lock this. Like make it its own little corner that just the IT department kind of handles. That would be a good idea, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of those where unfortunately the firewalls that have admin interfaces exposed are also the firewalls that are not going to get updated.
Exactly.
So this is probably going to stick around for a
Exactly.
hot minute.
Exactly. Oh, Russell Eubanks is on. There's I miss you, man. But his behind our firewall argument.
Yes.
Yeah. Nate says nothing wrong with South Dakota. Lots of space, not many people. Not this week, Nate. No.
That airport's going to be so busy they're not even going to know what hit them.
We had a direct flight from Charlotte come in yesterday. I've never, like, it's always Chicago, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Denver, and sometimes San Francisco. But Charlotte, and it was, I guess, like a quarter of it or half.
Someone commissioned a flight. That's
I don't know. I think the airlines were like, "There's a lot of people coming from the East Coast.
We could actually make money if we send another plane over there. You know that?
Oh my God!
Black Hills branded
I think
planes.
What's going on is Chicago, Denver, Salt Lake are like they're completely full. So to get another flight in, they probably had to change it up.
Yeah, I noticed that any flight changes right now. Weirdly, I was looking at them. Crazy expensive. It's like you pretty much got what you got. You're working that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Anyhow, that's why we always tell the employees, start booking your tickets like 10 months in advance. We're pretty sure we're going to be in business, folks. Buy your tickets now.
You'll get a credit that you could use never if you.
Yeah. So, but no, that's the argument. And I don't know. I talk about it, Ralph, Corey, it's a pain in the ass when our customers fight us on that, but let's also be honest. It's rare. Like I would say it's single-digit percentage of our customers push back on those. Or you think it's maybe like 10, 11.
Yeah, I don't see as much pushback on that kind of stuff. Like segmentation, a lot of times customers acknowledge like, yeah, we do need to do better at segmentation.
It's totally the junk food. It's like, I know I shouldn't eat this entire bag of Doritos, but I will anyway because I have no self-respect.
Yeah, but then you have customers like, I like these Doritos. They're tasty. Oh, God.
Yeah, that's true.
On the blue team side, Mike, do you feel that it's hard to push that type of network segmentation on a corporation? Like,
it depends on how old they are. It
depends
on
how big.
It depends upon how old. It depends upon what vertical they're in. Also, when you start talking about the financial with microtransactions and instantaneous stuff, any sort of slowdown. So any device, any sort of segmentation slows down that trading transaction. And you're talking millions upon millions of dollars in microseconds at times.
Yeah.
And so you get a lot of pushback on it.
Yeah. I mean, like segmentation is great, but I care way more about the internet.
Yes.
Priorities. If you're exposing your admin interface on your firewall to the internet, segmentation's probably not your today problem to solve.
Critical.
But IPMI was so nice when I was working at the data center. You know how nice it is just to log into something real easy. It's like I don't have to walk down there. I don't have to walk down and press the reset button on the server. Like it's the best. I just go reset.
What about Zero Trust? That'll fix all of this.
Oh, of course. Blockchain too.
We got all of it. It's IPMI on the blockchain.
Yes, you can prove your identity just to talk to it.
Insufficient IPMI coin balance to proceed with operating system updates.
Well, so I got a question. How did you all find out about those like backplane management interfaces? Like, did you find out about it as a general administrator and you're like, that's awesome. Now I don't have to go down to the NOC? Or were you doing a test and you were like, is this a gift from the gods for me? And then people explain it to you like, no. This way we don't have to go down. And it's just like, so every time the server reboots, it resets the default password back to the default password. Are you sure this isn't manna from the gods for pen testers? Like for me, it was on a DoD contract. And we had these big NAS servers, and you could totally access everything. And if they rebooted, it went right back to the default password. And I was just like floored. I was like, this seriously is a gift to pen testers. So what about you guys? Like when you found these like integrated lights out type management interfaces?
I was working in the data center. Not like I remember them showing me like, oh yeah, set up IPMI right now with an IP address as we're configuring the server in our, and then I set it up, set the password. I will admit we wiped default creds and we put in a new password.
Everyone does.
Threw it down.
Everyone
every now and then. And then it was literally the best thing ever. Like working graveyard, you don't want to walk outside, have to walk down to the data center. And I wasn't in the greatest area. And then go and then just the flip a switch. The IPMI was great. It was the gift from the gods. I loved it.
Oh my God. Mike B just shared a link, 3389rocks.com. Have you guys seen this?
Yeah, I have a sneaky suspicion without clicking on it.
Oh, you need to go. It is amazing. It is amazing. You got to see it.
It's basically just like someone's phishing site.
It's like make everyone a domain admin. We're not the regular security people. We're like, cool security people.
And Mike just got all of our IPs.
Yeah.
I want to review it on Yelp.
Yeah.
RDP to anywhere.
This has got to be Ian.
What sucks about that, Mike, is you're going to totally have like executives are like, so you told us, Mr. and Mrs. Pen Tester, that we need to shut down RDP from the internet, but I found a website called 3389rocks.com and they seem to disagree with you on this topic. It's like, oh God.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Hey, did Corey last week? Did you guys talk about the
news
C2 Brute Ratel getting leaked?
We did not actually. I threw it in the article, but in the notes, but we didn't get to talk about it.
So a little follow on to that. All right. So, anyone who doesn't know, Brute Ratel got leaked on the internet.
It's a C2 framework that was previously private, closed source, and now has been.
And if you're looking for a commercial C2 framework that's every bit as buggy as every other C2 framework, you should check out Brute Ratel. By the way, Brute Ratel, that is not a dig. You guys are good.
He's going to be tweeting.
It was awesome.
He's going to be tweeting.
I hate badgers. I hate badgers. Like,
what I wanted.
Oh, you love badgers.
What I wanted to
mushroom
reference though is, I guess, shortly after that that same week, Cobalt Strike also got the latest version, because like they all do. That's like kind of the point, right? Like.
That's one of the things I think is so funny about open source, the open source tool debate. They're like, oh, it's another tool on GitHub. And it's like, the commercial shit's all out there too. Like,
no, John, they have KYC. That picture of a Photoshop driver's license is protecting us all from getting hacked.
All of it right there. That's right.
All of it. So, okay, here's the bigger question. Let's just talk about the two, right? So Brute Ratel, another, C2 framework that's designed to, hopefully help in more hardened environments that have EDR and other kinds of deployments, right? And then we also have Cobalt Strike, which has kind of grew up before Brute Ratel and doesn't necessarily have a lot of those features built in, but it's still a very well-established C2 framework that a lot of real-world attackers are using and making it work for them. So what do you guys think about these being in the hands of more attackers? Good, bad?
I guess I'm glad we have proof, because I was assuming they already had it.
Yeah,
that's
it doesn't change the.
If this changes your threat model sucks.
Yeah, I'm going to throw out Nighthawk too, because remember they had a thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's only a matter of time before that code gets pushed out there in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah,
this goes back to this is an incredibly difficult market space, right? If you're I think it's only one owner, and I can't remember the dude's name. And then the people at Nighthawk, or if you're Cobalt Strike. Like your whole business model, if you're playing the game of we can bypass all these EDRs, that's an incredibly exhausting treadmill to be on. So there's a lot of respect for me for the people that do this, pity, awe, and just outright sympathy. Because once it gets leaked, now every single EDR out there is writing signatures for it, and you've got to go through. Oh no, wait, scratch that. They aren't. they don't care. Usually.
Yeah, I think,
Never mind.
first of all, I would assume that malicious actors have already been able to purchase these products through shell companies or,
Oh, yeah.
breaching security companies or MSPs that might already have a license. I think this is a unique example. As a red teamer, a lot of people complain, oh, red teams aren't really realistic. You're not using custom coded C malware, which is all that real threat actors ever use. I'm like, Colonial Pipeline, they use Cobalt Strike. I use Cobalt Strike and it didn't get detected. You have a problem. And I can say like, I am actually using the same tools, and I can prove
Googled Mimikatz.
Yeah, I can prove I'm using the same tools. I think this is, I guess, not good news for the creators. It sucks for them. They have to work on. But this is also kind of funny because this has been happening for years. Like, if you listen to that Darknet Diaries about the spam botnets, people were cracking copies of like C2s from 2006 and selling them, like reselling. And, it was every C2 ever has had the same treatment. So it is what it is.
Well, and, there's a couple of things, I always say about this, right? If your company cannot detect and deal with malware that is out on GitHub, with full source code and comments, we've got a problem on the defensive side of the shop, right? Like if that's like what wakes you up in the morning and they're like, holy crap, something's out there completely open source and people are using it, we're missing the point. I think that's number one for me. Number two, as far as like these commercial products and what they're actually doing, it's kind of similar to the open source tool that's out on GitHub. And I honestly think that these commercial tools, like if you're dealing with something like Cobalt Strike, you shouldn't be, if you're a company buying it, you shouldn't be buying it because it bypasses your EDR. You should be bypassing it because it can emulate like a whole, like hundreds of different post-exploitation activities that an attacker can do. It's just getting past the EDR is just one thing. Yeah. You shouldn't look at it and say, oh, well, Cobalt Strike was caught by CrowdStrike. We're good because attackers spend a lot of time and money modifying it to bypass those products.
Yes.
So you need to be using these tools, whether it's Nighthawk, Brute Ratel, Cobalt Strike. Don't be looking at it as just bypassing AV EDR, but what is all the other things that it can do? So I always say, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, for the blue team, right, when all this stuff gets open source, the first thing I do is like, all right, I have probably detections written this for this already, but I download it, run it right then and there. So then I can verify that my detections are working and understand the tool better. Like if I can go in there and read it, like I don't have time to go search and look at red team tools all the time. So when one comes open source and now is open availability for script kiddies or lesser hackers, right? This is a low hanging fruit that I could easily knock out of the park, right?
And it's not one you want to get burnt by because that's
exactly. Yeah. You already have, it's out there. You could have learned your lesson already, but you didn't. So that's as a blue teamer, it's important to look at.
And go ahead, Corey. Can you speak a little bit about getting on is not that difficult, but it's all the other stuff that's getting harder and harder because we've had this conversation. It's kind of one of your mantras.
Yes, for sure. So, and what I was going to say is that these tools now are more just about their configurations, and EDR is in the same boat. The tool doesn't have really an out-of-the-box functionality that is worth even using. So like, Cobalt Strike as an example, run DL32 default spawn 2 process. You have, why are all these run DL32 processes on my machine? Like it's not actually that well oiled and efficient at bypassing EDRs out of the box. You have to tune it. Like we've put a ton of research in to using C2 frameworks in different new and undiscovered, unpublished ways. That's how you bypass a tool, is not by taking it out of the box and saying, all right, bruteratel.exe, okay, bam, I just bypassed CrowdStrike. That isn't how it works. You have to configure it, and it's exactly the same as how you have to configure EDRs. Do we allow run DL32 to even spawn, or do we even need that? Do we have detections for, process injection or whatever? This is all configuration dependent, and it's scary to me that these C2s are... I wonder whether they'll be used appropriately or if it'll be similar to Googling Mimikatz and downloading it and then just running that. So it'll be interesting to see. But to John's point about initial access is assumed, and most EDRs don't even care about initial access, meaning detonating a payload, whether it's a DLL, an EXE, HTA, whatever executable format it is. Most EDRs allow it, and the reason they do is because people have to do their jobs. if I download, Intel audio editor.exe, it needs to run because it might not be malicious. It might just be how my Intel graphics update or whatever. But if it's actually malicious, it's going to do malicious stuff. It's going to talk to the internet. It's going to read bad processes. It's going to read files. It's going to do all kinds of behavioral things. And that's where you're going to run into those hurdles from an EDR perspective. That's why, as an attacker, when we walk into an environment and we start knocking down doors and no one says anything, hey, we run a process. Okay, no big deal. No concern. That's not a finding. Hey, we dumped credentials. Now that's a finding. If you didn't see that, that's a finding. Hey, we actually just injected shellcode that was unencrypted straight into another process and it calls to the internet. That's now we're building this list of findings. So from a real threat actor's perspective, it's going to be the same hurdles that we go through on red team. So it is kind of interesting to see the kind of paths are converging on threat actors, and red teamers are using the same tools and they're doing the same actions. So I guess hopefully that's good for red teams and bad for criminals, but we'll see.
And this goes back to, like, one of the things I always like to say is we're all purple, right? Yeah. So, like, going back to what Wade was just talking about a second ago, where it was basically, get these things, download them and run them. It's always concerning to me when you go into a blue team or a company, or I talk to a company, I'm like, what are you guys doing for tools? Are you using even something like, Atomic Red Team? Are you doing Scythe? Are you using Prelude? Are you going out and buying commercial tools? I think I mentioned Scythe or Brute Ratel or any of these different tools, and actually testing not just your EDR, but the other things. And there's beginning to be a really, really big delineation between the companies that are actively doing that as part of their day-to-day purple teaming exercises and the companies that are just waiting for the next pen test to come up.
Well, and that's what I get into, and Wade talked a little bit about it, is so many companies out there think, oh, I've got EDR, I've got it set to go ahead and automatically download the latest things that Microsoft, CrowdStrike, Palo Alto, whoever has got out there, and they don't actually do the tuning themselves. I've seen, to Corey's statement, some of these installers and watched the processes on them, and some of them are scary as all get up and go. It honestly could look like somebody is attacking you. And these are things that people need for their day-to-day. So you fine-tune it. You learn if it's running this process from here to there to here. Then if it's running all that, then it's fine. If it's not running it in this specific way, then you've got something that's somewhat alertable and have to fine-tune like that. And the tuning on the detections is a constant thing. It's never going to be a set and done, no matter how much people want to believe that.
I think that needs to be put in it. I asked about this on Twitter. I didn't really get a great answer, but how many alerts can one person keep tuned and ready to go in a network, right? Like, if you pull all of Sigma, and I know I've talked to Noah about this. You can't pull all of Noah in, or all of Sigma in and say, okay, we're good, right? You have to then tune 700 alerts. How many can I tune without creating so many false positives that I'm burnt out on alerts all day?
Wait, not even alerts, but just subscriptions with something like Sysmon and Sysmon Modular. You get over a certain threshold and WEC starts really breathing hard. And apparently chat 69 X, Y, and Z's. We got hit by a chatbot. Does that mean that
Don't go to that link?
Does that mean we're a real?
I already did. Well, we got hot singles in my area. I'll see you guys later.
Oh, that wasn't
most of the time it's spam, but now, no.
Now it's real. It was spam before. It's real now.
Now they're using data brokers, and it actually has your location history on the site.
Yeah. But back to that, I think that it's a problem on the red team to oversimplify what actually needs to be done on the blue team side, right? Like when you're talking about the number of detections, it's like firewall rules back in the mid 2000s, where the more firewall rules you had, the slower your firewall went. And that becomes more and more of a problem over time. And it's not an easy thing, not at all.
So when Corey was talking about how initial compromise is really easy, right? Do you find people more of targeting, we'll say a single vector in MITRE, or right? Are they just I will admit, I write a lot of tuning and a lot of alerts just for recon or discovery. right? Discovery. Sorry,
You mean
discovery.
post-exploitation discovery?
Post-exploitation. Yeah, most of my
Or-
alerts,
yeah.
as to Corey's thing, most of my alerts I write are post-exploitational detections,
Same here.
because that's when we're gonna get. It's so hard to write.
Well, and also those post-exploitation detections, you can also leverage multiple different aspects of detection,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like you have the endpoint and it's opening up network connections. Like if you have cmd.exe spinning off net1, that's like, okay, that's pretty much a red siren going off, right? But then you can also use network level detection as well. And it's something, one of the things we want to do in the roadmap with Rita and AC Hunter is that lateral movement, RFC 1918 movement inside of a network, helping detect post-exploitation activities, kind of getting into the dark trace, extra hop waters a little bit. But my point on that is you have more tools that you can bring to bear, right? Instead of just relying on your EDR stack and just looking at that. It's like, I had a meme and I might have to find it again, where it's like, you get an alert on a system and it may be repeating. It's like, it's kind of interesting. If you're getting like multiple different alerts on that system, now you're getting really interested, because that could be someone trying to escalate privileges. Now you're getting network connections. And if you're getting that same type of behavior on multiple systems, it's time to freak the hell out. And I think that kind of gradient of step up, of freaked outness, is something that's missing in a lot of security operations centers and blue teams out there today.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of that is due to the lack of good baselining of what your actual traffic needs to be.
But Mike, you go back to, I think that's a great point, but you go back to, we were talking about how hard is it to segment networks, and we were all like, older networks are a nightmare, right? How the hell do you baseline some of these networks for some of these companies that has been around for like 25 years? I'll give you an example. Sorry, this is one of my favorite examples of this, baselining networks. We were working with a company and we were baselining their network traffic for beacons. And I saw a beacon that was going out to the internet to a 128 address. Like 128.0.0. something. It was going out to the internet. And we're like, what the literal hell is that? That's bad. Turns out that this network engineer, when they first were starting to network their environment, noticed that every computer had a 127.0.0.1 IP address. And he wanted to create a network segment. So he just incremented that by 1 to 128. And he set up all of their data record systems that were all talking to each other to 128.0.0. something or whatever. That was the network ranges that he set up back then, which, by the way, if you remember, like people are like, well, couldn't you Google it? There was no freaking Google, right? This is just literally a guy that was trying to he's throwing poop at a wall and hoping it worked. And it worked. One of their systems was from the 90s, and it was still reaching out to a system that was a 128 and like 128.0.0. something. And that IP address was responding.
Yeah.
So you talk about those baselines, and you're right on the money. And that was one of the reasons when we created the critical controls years ago at SANS, is like, you started know your devices, know your IP addresses, know your applications. We started there. They were 1 and 2 because they were that important, but nobody implemented it because it was so hard to do. It was an absolute nightmare. And we were like, it's the most important thing. And everyone just skipped over it, went and deployed EDR instead.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, part of the responsibility of red teamers or any security professionals, but especially if you're being hired for your opinion, is to triage the severity of what you're saying. I could walk into an environment and run whatever miter.sh. It's going to tell you there's 1,500 tactics that you're not effectively detecting or whatever. But that's cool. But which one is going to make me fall over as a company and make me, look like an idiot on the internet?
I'm going to disagree a little bit, and kind of a little bit, because this is one of the arguments of a lot of the signatures that are written for MITRE techniques are very static. They're literally taking the MITRE examples or Atomic Red Team, and they're writing signatures for those exact things. And there's a bunch of people that said, you shouldn't do that because an attacker can bypass it. My thought is, if you start setting up these detects, an attacker may be able to bypass 1 or 2 of those, but if you have it instrumented and you have multiple, then it actually increases the chance of detection because the attacker won't be able to bypass all of them. And I don't know. That's
sorting detections by device. So when you get all those alerts, when you're looking through them, look by device, not by alert, right? And then you see everything in that one device just created 10 alerts. I get what you're saying.
I totally agree with you. However, if part of my job is to tell you what you should work on tomorrow and what you should prioritize first. Because obviously everyone should have every tool on every level. Everyone should have MITRE 100% coverage and all. But a lot of companies don't have that freedom to have, or the whatever. It's an imperfect. You have to apply an imperfect framework to an imperfect network. So when I'm telling a client, hey, your ADCS allows straight up privilege escalation, straight to DA. Don't pass go, don't collect $200. You literally just one web request and I'm DA. Now we have a problem. Like, that is worth me telling you, hey, fix this now. Not, oh, you didn't detect lateral movement technique 742, which is USB device exfiltration or whatever. Or, oh, your DLP doesn't work. Who cares? Let's not get hacked in the first place because I just got DA in 2 hours. Or, ransomware blast radius is like kind of a hot word that I've been using lately. It's like,
I like that.
Hey, I ran Snaffler. I ran a discovery in your environment, and there's 1.2 million files I can read with domain users group. This is this is a problem. Yeah, you can talk about how you don't have 100% coverage. You don't have you can't detect someone sending an email using ICMP SMTP implementation that someone raided in 1992. But this is you walk into the ER and they're like, oh yeah, straight to the front of the line. Come here. Like, you're bleeding. Come on.
And I think a good red team does two things. One, it does the triage and prioritization, and it also does gap analysis. Not a red team, I should back up, but like a purple team or something like that. That's kind of the goal and objective. And really, as red teamers, we're trying to be on that cutting edge to find the stuff that maybe they don't have the signatures quite ready for. Yeah. And that's great. It's just hard whenever you go into an environment, and I get complaints all the time from testers and tech editors and management. They're like, this company detected literally nothing that we did. Like, that's becoming rarer and rarer, but it is absolutely terrifying, because then in that situation, Corey, we get into the argument of, what the hell do you make for a recommendation? Where do you begin?
Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah, it's. I mean, obviously, it's one of those problems you have to approach from both sides. But yeah, if you walk into the ER and they move you up to the front of the line, you need to know the severity of what that means. And the same thing we do with red teams. If you detect nothing, we're like, come on, come here, come into the light, come out of the darkness. Let's start you. Hey, so you shouldn't have gunshot wounds. That you should not have those. We can work on that. We're not going to work on your cholesterol, but you should not have active holes in your body. So
No. But I've got this bunion on my foot. We're going to work on the gunshot wounds first.
My friend said,
honestly, I feel like some of our pen tests, there was a Monty Python skit where a guy was in Africa and he's like in a tent and his leg is missing. And everyone's around. They're like, oh, wow, you're missing your leg. And he's like, oh yeah, a lion came along and nipped it. Other people are like, but your leg is missing. Oh yeah. Yep, it's gone. Tea time. That's how I feel sometimes. We're like, literally we got DA in less than an hour. Nice. Tea time.
Yeah. So when's the report due then? Thanks. Yeah. All right, I'm going to put this in SharePoint.
You guys do a letter of attestation? Can I get that signed by John that says that our network's secure? Can I get that next week? Oh, dude, all the time.
They love your signature. It looks great.
I know they do. You should just share it with everybody in the company.
I'm going to bring you a letter of attestation. I'm going to bring you a letter of attestation at Deadwood and be like, can you sign this?
I probably would. I actually do read some of them. I do love the ones where the testers give me a heads up. They're like, I went through and I modified the wording so we don't say that they're secure anywhere in the letter of attestation. It's like, we tested them.
Yeah. See the results in document entitled.
Ask them, because you don't want to hear it from
entitled
us.
Not PCI compliant.pdf.
Remember, we can't make that determination. We leave that up to their QSA. Read the report, they're like, the hell? You're missing a leg. It was taken off by a freaking lion.
Yeah, when's tea time? I need it.
But tea is fantastic. Crumpets? All right, with that, everybody, thank you so much. I have no freaking idea what's going on the rest of this week. I know I'm teaching the next 2 days. I think Serena might be doing a flash CTF from Wild West Hacking Fest live on the stage.
There was an email. It just went out. Get on.
Oh, really? Did it just go out?
You can still buy virtual tickets, right?
Yeah, it was out this morning.
You can still get virtual tickets for the con. So you should show up. You should check that out. And with that, Ryan, take us out. Thank you so much, everybody. Talk to you later.
Thank you.
Bye.
Come say hi.